it's an interesting time we're living in, where all of a sudden we've got this pandemic that has hit the world. Normally, you get you get something happening, and it's normally localized to regions, right? Sometimes you might get bushfires in Australia, or floods or cyclones or something like that. All of a sudden, bang, we've got this pandemic that has hit the entire world at once, and it's really interesting to watch what different countries are doing, what different states are doing. It's kind of fun watching some presidents, deal with it the way they do it and get attacked by the left and the right all at once, which is interesting. It's interesting to see countries like Switzerland just do their own thing, just like, okay, we're aware of all the rules and regulations that a whole lot of different countries are putting in, but no, we'll just do our own thing and we're not going to do much about it. It'll be really interesting in history to see how that pans out for countries like Switzerland. We had a changing of rules literally like overnight, where things that were going to take days, weeks and months to change, all of a sudden, bang, right, here's our new rule for this. We've had to become extremely resilient, extremely adaptive to try to make the new rules work, and politicians, I guess, are scrambling not to look like complete idiots when they figure this out. So it's really interesting. In our world, that really fits in with our world of safety, where a lot of the rules and regulations we've got in place, right, to make the world safer, make our industry safer, make our workplace safer, that kind of thing. And all of a sudden, it's bam, let's flip them over and see how the new way of operating is going. What do you think, mate? How are you coping? What do you think?
Yeah, look, it's you're right. It's unprecedented. That I don't think in history we have seen something quite like what we're seeing now, what we're experiencing. It's just phenomenal. Like you say, almost overnight, virtually everyone's life was turned on its head. What we knew, what we were doing, the rules and regulations, all out the window. And from that point, I think the majority of people have been really sort of trying to adapt, and for the most part, those in authority have been flying by the seat of their pants, so to speak. Making up rules, regulations on the fly, with best advice at that point in time. And it's been interesting to watch. You're right. You see the differences across countries, across states, how different individuals are treating it, and it's just, in one way it's chaos, and in another way it's really quite interesting to watch. I'm a bit like you. I actually enjoy watching it unfold in some ways, just to see what's going to be next, what decisions are going to be made and taken, and how people will react to that. Like you say, in our industry, safety and risk is something we deal with every day. And I can't help but sort of equate that to this circumstance. I look at a lot of the decisions that are being made, a lot of the announcements, the press conferences, and those sorts of things, and I'm always interested and thinking about, well, what was that decision taken? What was the risk there that led them to take that particular course of action? Sometimes it's very obvious, and other times I just shake my head and think, you really haven't thought this through. And then when you equate that across states and across countries, there's circumstances where supposedly, one state thinks it's a particular risk and another state thinks, no, that's not a risk. You can't help but shake your head and think, well, you've either got this right or you've got this wrong. Purely based on a risk, I guess, a risk assessment. It's really, to me, it's quite intriguing. It's quite interesting to see how it's unfolding.
It'll be interesting to watch, to look back in the future, right, and look at the way we've done things, and assess, when like from the 1G armchair, look back and go, yeah, these guys did well and these guys didn't do so well. I think
yeah,
adaptive, like we've been talking about adaptive culture for years and years and years now, right? And resilience in businesses, which is a really important part of business, right?
absolutely.
Even
Yeah,
prior to COVID-19.
yep,
It's good to see businesses adapt and make it work.
yep,
And we've definitely seen some that have not adapted so well. They may not have the ability to do that. They may not have the staff, the money, like
yep,
the backing behind them, whatever the reason may be. Um, the big companies, right? You expect them to have, with the amount of people they've got, they've got a HR industry and the
yep,
financial industry behind them, and like in their own embedded within themselves, within the companies. And so when
yep,
something goes wrong, they can turn to them and go, "Hey, what do you think about this? What do we do?" And they, "Oh yeah, they're
yep,
experts," and they'll give their advice and they'll act on that. Some companies just don't have that. Uh,
yeah,
Particularly some of the airlines, like a lot of the budget airlines, they're running on a budget because they're skin and bones. They don't have that sort of resilient workforce to answer those questions for them. So they have no choice. It'll be interesting to see what happens if they get to make it back.
yeah. Look, you're right. History will tell. There'll be hopefully some lessons coming out of this, and people will look at those companies that were resilient, that did adapt, and take lessons from it. And you'd foolish not to. But look at those businesses that did survive through this, and not only survived but thrived. And say, well, what did they do? How were they successful? I think it's industry dependent in some cases. Obviously, there's a lot of industry that have been crippled, and there really isn't much adaptation that they can do just purely because of the industry they're in. But then there are other businesses that I look at and I think, well, you're not adapting because, well, firstly, humans don't adapt particularly well to change. We don't like change. Secondly, I think it's a well-known fact that cultural change is generational. It doesn't happen overnight, and here we are being forced into a circumstance where we're expected to be instantaneous. But more importantly, I think it comes down to that old word leadership. I think if at the top you've got people who are genuinely showing those leadership traits, people will come along for the ride. They'll take the hit and help the business and help each other, and they will be more resilient from that perspective. But companies that have CEOs or boards that are somewhat throwing their hands in the air and saying, "Government, help us out," doesn't really portray a particularly good image to the employees and the broader community. And they're the companies that I don't think will really pull through this. There's an expectation almost that someone else will solve the problem for them, rather than pulling up their socks and getting amongst it and working out, right, well, how do we adapt? They're bound to fail. That's my opinion. You just need to look at social media to see the level of creativity and adaptation that's out there at the moment. Businesses doing all sorts of things that, you've got gin distilleries that are now producing hand sanitizer and have changed the business model in days. You've got what was a thriving pub that's now managed to provide a thriving food delivery service. It's not impossible. There are many businesses out there that are doing it and successfully so. So I think it comes down to in some sense leadership. How much you want it. So yeah.
I think perception is reality in a lot of these cases as well.
Yeah.
If somebody is seen to be doing something, it's like, cool, they're successful. Let's go along with them. I think
absolutely get on board. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Don't play the pity card. Get amongst it. And
some have got no choice. Some are probably bare bones, and they may have to. They might go, I really need to put up my hand early. But there's others that are really winning. I think as far as airlines go, I've been watching AirAsia, Now, they're almost a budget airline, but they've always just said, we're not going to stake any staff. We're going to look after our staff. Now they're out there putting these stupid. They're not stupid. I'm sure it's effective. They've got designer PPE wear, so they'll wear their PPE suit with the PPE mask, and it's got AirAsia writing written all over it. Like, come on, that's actually pretty good. That small stuff that people perceive they're actually working to do something really good. It might actually work for them. You never know. Yeah.
Well, again, time will tell, I suppose. Yeah, look, the airline industry is interesting. And I think if you look by country, it's also really quite interesting. Those airlines that are sort of still surviving and where in the world they are, to me is quite intriguing. You're seeing a lot of, for example, US airlines parking aircraft. Not the same in Asia. Europe, not quite the same, although they've taken a hit. I think it also says a little bit about potentially culture and support that these airlines are receiving. Yeah, AirAsia is an interesting case, like you say, budget airline somehow still holding it together or seemingly holding it together, trying new things, and thus far it's kind of working for them.
See how it goes.
Yeah, they are having a go of it. I mean, closer to home, you look at the differences between Qantas and Virgin, I guess, and why is Qantas still amongst it, and Virgin's gone into, in essence, liquidation. I don't want to point the finger of blame, but I think that Virgin really didn't adapt as quickly as they could have. I think they were in a bit of strife pre-coronavirus, and they were very quick to sort of throw their hands in the air or throw their hand out to government. And they sort of, it appeared to me that they almost threw in the towel very quickly. And whether that's deliberate to try and generate interest and more investment through liquidation, I don't know, but we'll see. We'll see what happens long term. No, look, I really hope they. I hope they survive for a whole bunch of reasons, or that there's a resurgence anyway, a renewal. We see Virgin 2.0, whatever that looks like. It would be devastating for Australia, I think, if we were to have a sole airline.
I do agree. Yeah, we've been down that road, haven't we? Competition is very important.
We have, and really, there's no positives. And to be honest, when you see a large percentage of Qantas employees who are also hoping for a Virgin resurgence, you got to wonder.
Why is that? Why is that, do you think?
In part, I think. Look, this is opinion only.
Sure.
But I think
we're not here just to tell the facts, mate.
Look, personally, I think it's a case of Qantas would rather a weaker opposition than a strong opposition. So, if Virgin survives, as opposed to Virgin being taken over, it's a competitive but weaker opposition to them. If, for example, a large conglomerate came in, Singapore Airlines or someone like that came in, pumped a lot of money into Virgin, Qantas would struggle for, in the very short term at least. Typically, what you see is airlines when they first commence operations, they'll take the hits up front to try and bring that competitiveness back into the market, to try and get their market share, and that will hurt Qantas. And if it is someone like Singapore Airlines or even any of the groups that are being bandied around, they've got the money and the backing behind them that they can do that. They can wear those losses up front, and that will hurt Qantas. So I think quietly, Qantas board was hoping that Virgin might have been bailed out because they would have stayed as a weaker competitor, and it wouldn't have hurt them as much.
Sure. Yeah, I think it's really interesting. So Virgin, yes, it's now primarily foreign owned, which I completely understand. But what you've got tens of thousands of Australian jobs right now. That's what we need to look after, right? And there's no doubt about that.
Yep.
But the Australian government doesn't necessarily have to bail out a foreign-owned company. That's not our bag. Sure,
No.
they can put in some money towards it, like the Queensland government did with trying to keep the headquarters in Queensland. But it's got to be worked out, and I hope it does, because you know what I really want to see. I want to go back to the glory days. Remember when you used to be able to log on to the Virgin website at lunchtime, and you'd get your $49 $49 flights from Brisbane to Sydney and Melbourne and stuff. That's
absolutely.
What I want to see come back.
Yeah, I mean that's what we all want, right? We all, who doesn't love a cheap getaway? And I think we, I'm confident that we will have a second airline, and I think for the first probably 12 months you're going to see some pretty good deals, whilst they try and get that foot in the market.
Yeah.
So,
well, at the moment they've still got all their aircraft. From what I understand, their aircraft are still under lease. They're being, they're on the ground somewhere, relaxing in storage at the moment.
Look, I mean, there's opportunity for someone to literally step straight in the door and take over everything. One of the big challenges will be, I think, regulation. It's not easy to establish an airline, and equally, it's not easy to rebrand an airline. So it will be interesting to see how CASA responds and what sort of government pressure is put on to CASA to support that, re-emergence of whatever that airline looks like, whatever Virgin 2.0 looks like.
Sure. Yeah, I completely get regulations, but CASA, being a heavy regulated government organisation, may need to just look out and go, all right, let's just play the COVID-19 game, and let's loosen up on some of those regs for just a little while, to let this happen, and hopefully that's sort of what does go down. Yeah,
and look, I don't want to bag out CASA too much, but I think there's a lot of room within their regulations to relax a little bit. Again, going back to the whole risk side of the house, you've got to look at, well, what is the risk? What is the risk here? You're taking, in essence, an airline that was one brand. It's been renamed. It's financed by different people, but overall, you've got the same employees operating under the same, AOC, flying the same aircraft with the same training system. Yeah. So really, what's the risk here? Potentially there is a risk. Don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to say there isn't, but I think you take a bit more of a liberal approach to how you allow them back into the market. And I hope that CASA do. I hope that they can, for the sake of everyone.
Yeah.
And actually, I hope that this whole COVID thing is impetus for them to do that across the aviation spectrum, not just in terms of one airline. But they've already. I'm not sure if you follow CASA at all, or some of their regulations, but they've already thrown a lot out the window. They've already taken a risk managed approach to everything from extensions of aircraft servicings through to delaying
aircrew medicals and
licensing and checks and a whole bunch of things. And I think that's good. I think it's a good first step. I think there could be a lot more of it, but it's a good step.
Yeah, no, I don't think anyone's going to. Don't think anything too serious is going to happen if you extend someone's medical by 6 months or 12 months or whatever. It ends up being, no one's going to.
And again, you've got to think about the environment, right? I mean, what else can you do?
Yeah,
you literally are going to, if you continue to enforce those regulations, you're going to cripple the entire sector. There will be no one. At some point, you have to allow someone to, to start flying again, unless you want to completely get rid of your industry. So, really.
Look, it's the end of April now. I think, we'll probably be having this sort of discussion for the next 6 to 7 or 8 months, going by what some people are saying, potentially not till the end of the year. So, things are going to change, obviously, and we expect that to happen.
Yeah, I think what you'll see is an opening of aviation freight first, and then it will be a very slow return to domestic services from there. I don't think you'll see international flights outside of cargo, probably till at least next year. I would almost go so far as to say mid next year.
Really? Wow.
You may have airlines coming into Australia, but I think it'll be just interesting to see. I think how people, as society, how society responds when lockdown's released. Are people going to have the same confidence in travelling by air as they once did? Are they going to want to travel internationally straight away? What are people thinking? As a society, have we changed? Are we going to stay, semi social isolated just by circumstance, just because of there's that little bit of uncertainty still? Or is it just going to be an instantaneous, almost as quick as it started? Are we going to revert to what we were doing?
I anticipate when flight centres and all the travel agents open up again, it'll be a bargain basement, 100%. It'll be dirt cheap to go all over the place when international travel does come back. Well, firstly, the domestic routes will be I think will be a lot cheaper to generate tourism and the dollar into our cities and regional centres, and then they'll step up the international game as well, and be able to go to Europe for half the price or whatever it used to be in the States as well. They'll just get that. I reckon it'll go gangbusters. Personally, that's my
I think
prediction.
Yeah, it's a fine balance, isn't it? Because you've got to price seats such that it's profitable for you as an airline, but equally you've got to make it enticing enough for people to want to travel. Who knows? I don't know. I don't know. It'll be interesting to watch. I think the other thing to consider is that we've kind of got into a circumstance where we've managed to kick this virus almost out of the country, if that's the right term. But there'll be I think a lot of nervousness about allowing people to move between countries again until there's a vaccine.
Sure. No, totally. I totally agree.
Yeah. So look, like you, I think that the government will pump a lot of money into tourism, and by virtue into aviation, supporting that, and domestic routes will go gangbusters and probably be quite cheap, particularly if there's a second airline back in the market at that stage. And like you, mate, I'm hoping that's what we see. I'd love nothing more than to get out and travel a bit.
I know, right? Yeah. You know what I find? This is what I'm concerned about. Like my prediction for the future when it comes to that. So firstly, you've got so they say, all right, in 6 months' time, okay, we're going to ramp up the domestic routes, for example. Right? So there might be 30, 40, 50 aircraft sitting out on runways in local airports. Right? Yep. All these maintainers are going to rock up to and start regenerating to get back into service. Okay, there's obviously a lot of cost, a lot of time involved in that, and that's completely normal. That alone carries a lot of risk, because you've got guys that may have been sitting at home for quite a long time. They might be packing shelves in Woolies right now, and that's where they're working for the next 3 or 4 or 5 months. All of a sudden, all right, boys, come back in. You can get your 737s ready to go again. It's like, oh, okay. That's one period I'm concerned about. Another one, and correct me if I'm wrong, I'm not 100% sure here, but so fuel at the moment, Avtur, is incredibly cheap. In fact, the oil companies are paying people to take it off their hands because there's so much of it.
Yep.
Now, a lot of people are going to go, yeah, cool, let's chuck that in our tanks and fill them up right now. From memory, fuel's got a shelf life, and along with long-term fuel storage comes long-term micro bad organisms that get in the fuel, which ends up in aircraft. And I don't know how they're going to deal with that. I haven't heard much about that sort of side of things yet.
It's a good point you raise. I think in-ground storage facilities, you can store fuel for considerable time, as long as it's treated and monitored appropriately. And a lot of the problems in fuel is due to stagnation. So you can avoid a lot of the problems you see by moving fuel. So I'm with you. If there's aircraft out there that haven't necessarily been, appropriately prepared for long-term parking, what does that look like? You've got fuel that's just sitting stagnant in wings, Or like you say, let's say an airline decides to go and fill up their fleet while fuel prices are cheap and it sits there for a while. That's when you're going to run into problems. I think, look, I don't think anyone's even really started to think about
not yet.
Getting back into flying operations yet. We're at that point now where they've weathered the initial storm of what do we do, how do we manage this. All right, now there's potential. There's flying operations on the horizon, and they'll start to turn their attention to that. But you're right; these are all good questions that need to be answered, and it'll be interesting to see how regulators, companies, and even down to the individuals themselves respond. Will employees who have been out of work for a long period of time, are they going to stick their hand up and say, "Look, I don't feel comfortable that I'm proficient enough to go straight back to maintaining a wide-bodied aircraft," and then how will the company respond to that? So you do. It's a perfect setup, really. Systemic setup that individuals won't feel that they can stick their hand up. Companies won't want to fork out the money to go and provide that bulk level of training. So where does that leave you? And are they even thinking about some of these things? Has anyone actually thought about it? I'd like to think they are. They're pretty set in that regard. But all very good questions, mate. I don't know. I think it's too early to tell.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm just doing that prediction scale. I'm sure pilots. I'm sure those simulators will be going 24/7 for the weeks leading up to that. They'll be smashing those simulators to get.
I've no doubt. Yeah, look, and that will be a challenge. That will, I think, maybe not so much for pilots, but just training and familiarity will dictate how quickly services return. Qantas can't just bring their entire fleet back online instantaneously.
No.
So you're right. They're going to be those sims will be running hot 24/7. They almost already do though. Even now with just their ongoing cyclical training. So it will be interesting to see how they do that. The training system will dictate a lot of things, I think. Because you can run a simulator 24/7, but you can only do that if you've got instructors, right?
Exactly.
So they'll run out, I think.
What do you think? I don't think it's such a problem in Australia. We've got a reasonably new fleet in Australia.
Yep.
Overseas, you've got a lot of older fleet like 757s, 767s.
Yeah.
Even the A380. The A380 is one of the younger aircraft in the fleet. But those ones cost a lot of money to maintain, especially the older ones. Right?
Yeah.
What's your prediction on those sort of aircraft? Do you reckon they'll send them straight to the junkyard or make hot dog stands out of them now, or will they try to bounce them back? Do you reckon?
I think you'll see a lot of those older fleets will be retired or sold off very, very cheaply. There is a lot of there's a lot of opportunity here, and what you might see is some ultra budget airlines trying to snap up very cheap aircraft that are being offloaded by other major players. And my fear in that case is that a lot of these budget airlines will be financed by companies that know nothing about aviation, and they will literally raise an airline from the ashes using very old aircraft that they've picked up at a very cheap price, and that's disastrous in my opinion. Look, I think you'll see a lot of aircraft will be scrapped. I think the older aircraft will be the first ones that companies offload. Already in Qantas, there's talk of Qantas, parking 747s. They had a phase-out plan, and they were implementing that phase-out plan. But there's a lot of people who think the 74 will never fly again with Qantas. But again, it's going to depend on market, isn't it? If they need 747s, for whatever reason, they'll fly them again.
Yeah.
No doubt. Yeah.
Particularly.
And even today, I was reading an article about, for example, is really, really hurting. So, pumping out new aircraft parts, components, all of those sorts of things. That's going to be another problem for airlines to have to manage, because they don't stockpile a lot of spares. So, and if the major manufacturer is hurting now and lays off a bunch of employees and stops producing, that's going to take some time to regenerate and support fleets. And I bet that, when they're looking at, right, where do we focus our attention for parts manufacture, it's not going to be to the older generation aircraft. They'll look at where the dollars are. All right, which companies are operating the biggest fleets, and what are they flying? What are they flying in those fleets? And that's where they'll focus their attention, I reckon. So
yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah. There's a lot of questions, mate.
I know, right?
How this is all going to unfold, it's really quite interesting. A lot of speculation.
Let's keep chatting over the coming months, and we'll see how we go.
Absolutely, absolutely, yeah.
I even think I'm worried about the life of the A380. There's a lot of people talking, because that's already an expensive beast to maintain. Some airlines are finding it that economical pre-COVID.
Yeah.
And now, obviously, they're sitting there. There's a lot of people saying that they may not bounce back. Who knows? So that'll be another interesting one.
Yeah. Again,
especially when you've got 787 and the A350 doing the same routes.
Well,
with a twin engine.
Interesting. You should mention both those aircraft, because I've heard and read a couple of interesting things regarding engines for both those types, and having quite a few issues with engines. So I don't know that that's necessarily the solution yet. When you look at an aircraft and you've got an engine hanging out in that wing that's several tens of millions of dollars worth.
Yep.
Do you want to stick with an aircraft that's a known entity, or do you want to push for a new, more modern aircraft, which, if works, will save you some money, but equally, the stakes are pretty high. You might end up going the other way. So,
what sort of issues are they having? Like, are they having shutdown issues, like failure issues?
Not so much failure, temp issues mainly is what I'm hearing. So, precautionaries, I think, if anything, precautionary maintenance, precautionary shutdowns, that sort of thing. So,
okay.
Yeah, but look, who knows? Yeah. The one thing that has happened though is that this whole issue with lawsuits over aircraft incidents has all gone very quiet. So,
really, what do you mean?
Well, you look at I guess, so we had potential lawsuits for downing of a couple of airliners, a couple of crashes and things like that. And they've all gone quiet now. The lawsuits seem to have stopped. And who knows on the back end of this where that'll all pan out. Will they kick those off again? And
if you get busy with if other things pop up, they go on the back burner, don't they? So,
that's it. That's it. I mean, the manufacturers and those airlines are probably sitting there and rubbing their hands together, going, "Oh, thank you." On one hand, but equally on another hand, they're going, "Jesus, this is killing us." So
wow. It's interesting. What about the new normal? Do you reckon what we're seeing now is the new normal, or is it just just happens for a little while, then we go back to what was before, or will it be something completely different in the future? What's your prediction, mate? Like, I guess with airlines, let's stick with that subject for now.
Sure. Look, I think I don't think we have a new normal yet. I think there will be a new normal. I don't think we're there yet. I don't think we've found what that new normal is. I just think there's too much turmoil at the moment. We are in a massive state of flux. So airlines are still adjusting, and at some point it will stabilise, and that will be the new normal. It will not look like what we know as or knew as the normal. It will be quite a different world, and I think it's going to be driven a lot more by money and security. You'll start to see. I think airlines playing it a lot safer. You'll see the unions will be seeking more security for workers. You'll see regulators who are forced, not by choice, but forced, I use that word, forced by circumstance to rethink their regulations and the level of oversight they provide. I think the grassroots aviation, I'll call it grassroots aviation, in Australia is dead, is my gut feel.
What do you mean by that?
General aviation. So I think general aviation feeder organisations to the major airlines will not survive this.
But surely they need to train pilots, right?
Well, they do. Yeah, you're right. I mean, you need to feed the beast. Yeah. I don't think that'll happen in Australia. I think general aviation was already struggling. There is no margin in general aviation. There is no profit. Regulators have made it extremely difficult. Insurers have made it expensive. Fuel prices, component prices, aircraft prices, right down to operations. The operational cost at an airport is just so prohibitive for general aviation. Yeah. And with this on the back of this, and a lot of flying schools have stopped operating. I don't think they'll recover. I think there'll be very, very few.
It's very sad.
It is ridiculously sad. It's ridiculously sad. So what will that look like? Well, if you're not feeding airlines in this country from pilots that have been trained here, you've got no choice but to get them from overseas. Now, depending on where overseas you get them from, what does that look like?
Do you think, because Australia's got the airspace, right? Do you think overseas, for example, say you got Qantas at Wellcamp up in Toowoomba, right? So they've only just started in the last sort of 12 months, I think. It started getting big. I think are they partly owned by Singapore Airlines? Maybe I'm reaching there, but I did hear something that they were a conglomerate.
I'm actually not sure, mate. To be honest with you, I know Wellcamp was started, by basically a very wealthy cocky. And
I did hear because they came down to work with us for a little while to the airspace between Amberley and Toowoomba, so they could keep out of each other's way mainly, especially with the fast jets. And they were talking about this expansion plan. They got 8 diamonds and they're going to 12 and then 16 and 24 and whatever. You're right. It'd be really, really interesting to see what happens there.
Yeah, look, I think you'll get. When I say, I think general aviation will still continue in this country. It won't be a feeder to our airlines. Though. You might have a flight training school, whether it's based in Wellcamp or Tamworth or any other regional airports, but it will be wholly owned by a foreign entity to train foreign pilots. I think the days that we have seen in the past where you get flying training schools that are training locals.
So when you got a young 16-year-old just finishing high school and he's done an aviation degree partly in high school and he's keen to fly a 787 in the future, if he doesn't get into one of those, he's probably in some serious trouble. Is that what you're thinking? Because they already were, right?
Yeah, I think typically what you see in general aviation is you get a guy who goes to his local flying school, he gets to PPL standard, he then does some local instructing to build his hours, and then very quickly gets his commercial license, and then he shoots off to outback Australia somewhere to fly a charter, and builds more hours before getting into a larger charter operation, and then eventually works his way through the regional airlines, and then into something like Qantas. I think in the future your only option will be a cadetship or through the military.
Yeah.
I think a lot of those smaller regional options will be closed out. There'll be a lot of training schools that won't exist. There'll be fewer instructors. A whole bunch of things. In terms of going back to the original question of the new normal, I think the new normal is that GA will look very, very different in this country, which obviously has flow-on effects to commercial and RPT operations.
Yeah.
And you combine that with a significantly more foreign-owned airline in Virgin 2.0. Aviation will not be. You won't see aviation as a hobby. You won't see it as a major industry employing significant numbers of Australians. You'll see it as a business opportunity for international investors.
Yeah, wow, that's very interesting.
Yeah, new normal. Culturally, I think will shift. I think fundamentally, people's, how people operate in aviation won't change, except for we do know there are marked differences in how people, different cultures train and operate. But generally speaking, aviation, from that perspective, won't change. Risk, I mean, the same risks will exist. It's just how we treat them. And as I sort of said before, I think we'll treat them a little bit more liberally. We won't be quite so risk averse, maybe in some areas. In other areas, we will be. Just the way it'll be interesting to see how people behave on aircraft. People interaction. And that sort of thing on airlines. Just before, I travelled just before the full lockdowns. I think it was on Virgin. I travelled, and they weren't issuing meals anymore.
Really?
It's too high risk. Transmission, infection, and those sorts of things. So are the days of you travelling on an airline and getting a nice little meal, are they gone? A whole bunch of things I think that will become a new normal, and they'll be dictated not by the airline industry itself, but I think by how people respond, and how people's opinions change, I guess. It's interesting. We were talking about this the other day. I went into the supermarket the other day. I was walking down one of the aisles, and there was a person coming the opposite way to me. And after I passed that person, I found I sort of checked myself. I went, man, I just held my breath as I walked past that person, and I moved right over as far as I could, right? And that was just pure instinct, And then I looked around and I saw the same thing happening. Other people were doing the same thing, and so I think, when this is all over, is that what we're going to see? Is that going to continue?
Yeah. Good point.
And so look, I don't know. I've banged on enough, mate. But I think there will be a new normal. I don't think we know what that is yet. I don't think we're there yet. There's a lot of things that will.
A bit of the storm to go.
Yeah. And that's not necessarily a bad thing either, by the way. It could be, but time will tell.
Absolutely. I think I just used a bad analogy when I said there's a fair bit of the storm to go. I think that's a really bad way to look at this whole thing. It's not like we're so used to, on the 24-hour news cycle, like a storm hits and then it goes away and then you clean up and then you move on. I don't think this is going to be the same. It's not a storm that's just going to go away and you clean up and move on. It's going to have a lot of thicker long-term effects, which is a bit of a worry. Yeah, so it will be interesting.
Yeah. It'll be, no doubt. Again, I'm watching on with interest to see what happens.
Okay.
How about you, mate? What do you think the new normal will be?
Oh, look,
if there is one, for that matter. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm with you. It'll be different, and it's a very difficult thing to predict. Like if anyone asked me in the middle of February what late April would look like, yeah, I wouldn't be able to tell them. And yeah, every single movie you watch on every pandemic, this is
yeah,
where it comes to. You know,
yeah,
comes
yeah.
to,
It's right.
it generally ends up in zombies. Okay,
Yeah,
for entertainment value, we're not there yet, which is great. Hopefully, we never get there. But it doesn't like I think. Um, yeah, the world economies are taking a hit.
yep,
But I think it's for the best.
yeah, yeah,
That that crawl back will be a long crawl. Any surpluses that any country's had, they're out the window.
oh
Um,
yeah,
and
yeah,
how the banks react, how insurance companies react, all the premiums are going to go up. It'll be very interesting. So as much
yeah,
as we're as much as we're kind of like I'm me personally, like as far as I don't like the fact that there's a virus and that people are dying and
mm,
getting very sick from it. That's obviously a very bad part.
yeah,
But the rest of it is actually kind of fun. Being stuck at home with your family, getting to know like your family again. It's fantastic. And there's no
yeah,
you don't have to go like as much as it's fun. Oh, let's go for a drive down the Gold Coast, or let's go visit my mum or my brother. As much as I
yeah,
want to see them, it's like no, that's just off the table. So you're just putting up with what you've got. And the Monopoly board's probably getting hammered, and Netflix and that sort of thing's getting smashed as well. But it's actually I'm saving so much money. It's not funny. It's kind of good.
yeah. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
right. Yeah, I think it's been a good thing for for society. People are reconnecting and getting creative and really starting to appreciate things a lot more than what they perhaps did. Um, so I think that's good. Like you don't want to see people dying from this thing, but yeah, there's certainly been some positives I think from it. So
yeah. You got to look. Got to weigh it up. I am
yeah,
concerned. Yes, that so tonight, like the last 2 days, 3 days, the news is
yeah,
starting to talk about. Yes, okay, we've done really well in flattening that curve, and there's no doubt
yeah,
in Australia we have done quite well at that.
mm,
Um, but as soon as you release it, like today, Bondi Beach, yeah, they've got these little uh, areas cordoned off to prevent thousands of people
yeah,
going down there.
yeah,
But my biggest concern is just looking back at history. Is the Spanish flu second round was
yeah, yeah.
four times as bad as the original round. That's the part that scares me. I think
Look,
I
yeah,
do not think we should jump back into anything
yeah.
anytime soon. Yeah,
Yeah, I'm with you. I think, suffer the pain. I think it would be more demoralising and devastating to go into a second full lockdown. I think people would cope better with having a longer lockdown this first time round than releasing them and then having to force them back in lockdown again because of exactly what you're talking about, that second tick, uptick. And like you say, look at history.
yeah,
Even look at Wuhan. Where the epicenter, where it all started, and their second, I guess, resurgence of the virus. Yeah, I think it's dangerous. It's
What did
dangerous.
you say? So what do you mean the resurgence in Wuhan? Is it?
Well, so Wuhan starting to see some cases again. So they started
Ah, okay.
started to see some new cases. China
Is
sort
that
of
is
talked
that
about
because
how
they're starting to tell the truth, or you know? I'm not getting into
they.
any conspiracies, mate. No.
Yeah. I know, fair point. Yeah. I do find it interesting that China's got less cases than places like Italy, but anyway,
I am very skeptical. Yes, about how
yeah,
quickly
yeah, yeah.
that curve flattens.
Well, yeah,
Yeah,
who knows? But
yeah,
I'm nervous. I think, and I think there's a large part of society who probably is. So that's why I think even when the lockdown is removed, I still think there'll be people out there, quite a number of people who are reluctant to go out, who still sort of practice, social distancing, and they'll still allow 1.5 meters when they go into shops and all those sorts of things.
mm,
Uh,
yeah. Have you
yeah.
downloaded the new COVIDSafe app?
No, I didn't. I haven't downloaded it, to be honest.
Plan to?
No, I don't. And hate on me if you like, mate. I just have a fundamental issue with It's not so much the security that concerns me. I mean, that does concern me a little bit. I'm more opposed to the fact that it's gone to an offshore company and one as large as Amazon to basically develop and store data and those sorts of things.
Is that because Amazon's the only sort of company with the power? When I mean power, I mean hard drive power.
Look, I don't.
It's a lot of people.
Yeah, it is a lot of people. I mean, I would say no, because there are several other countries who have developed similar apps that are storing, greater amounts of data than this app supposedly is. Look, I think that Amazon probably were able to deliver an app quicker than potentially an Australian competitor might have been able to. And maybe that's what swayed the government, but I still fundamentally think it's wrong. And I guess there's a bit of a stance from me in the government saying, trust us, trust us, trust us. We're all in this together. And they don't have a particularly good track record. So, trust is something earned, and in my opinion, they haven't earned it yet. So, look, people talk about Facebook and, Instagram and all those other things, even Zoom, for example, who owns and operates and what data does it collect and all that sort of stuff. And, I'm pretty, I don't like to share too much info on social media, and, I'm pretty careful with data and security and those sorts of things. So, at this stage for me, it's a no, because there's too many unknowns. So I think the idea behind it's good. Look, I don't know what else you could do.
Just concerned about the security side of things.
It's the security. It's the fact that it was a bit of a stance about offshore, ownership, I guess. Personally, I would like to, rather than the app, what I would like to see more of is testing. You look at, I guess, to equate it to, risk, or the bow tie theorem, right? So you have the incident, yep, and you have preventative measures, and then you have the recovery measures. Well, to me, the tracing app is a recovery measure, and the preventative measure is testing. So if you ramp up the amount of testing, and you can, test a hell of a lot more people and actually identify which people have the virus earlier that way, rather than saying, well, now we know if we did discover a person got it, we can work out who else it might have spread to. To me, that sort of seems the wrong way about it.
How often would you have to test, though, do you think? Like for a virus that's got a gestation period of 2 to 4 weeks?
Well, I think if you were to test, I don't know, 80% of the population every 2 weeks, I don't know cost-wise,
big deal,
the practicalities of that. But, I think that would probably work.
Okay.
Maybe it's more expensive to do that, but, for me, I think that's a far better approach to take. We seem to be throwing no amount of money matters at everything else, at every other problem. So, if it's a problem of money, then I find that a little bit hard to believe.
Funny, right? So you always think about that adaptive capacity. Have we got the capacity to, prior to this, have we got the capacity to run our business and to put all the risk controls in place?
Yeah.
Really expensive to do that, but it's far more expensive to
absolutely
when something goes wrong, and that's where we currently are now. That they just got to throw money at it to prevent worst case. Yeah.
Well, that's the problem, right? I mean, the tracing app, all it does is it goes, well, we've identified that this one person has coronavirus, which means that potentially these 10,000 people have coronavirus. Well, how do we deal with that? I mean, what good is that? I mean, you can do it through an app, or you can do it through regular testing, right?
Yeah.
And there's so many, in my opinion, there's so many flaws with the app that it's not particularly accurate. From what I understand, it relies on a Bluetooth handshake. You have to have been in contact with someone for more than 15 minutes with a certain, within a certain distance. So if you've got a weak Bluetooth signal for whatever reason, it's not going to give you an accurate result. I don't know where 15 minutes comes from. I mean, I'm pretty sure that coronavirus is spread by droplets. You could get a droplet in
seconds.
10 seconds.
Honestly,
So,
I think that's just an arbitrary number they went with. Yeah, I guess. Yeah.
Well, yeah. So to me, I think the app is probably more expensive than increased testing, and is less effective, in my opinion. And so I would like to have seen them go down that path rather than the app.
Yeah. Well, I'm not the opposite. I do definitely agree with the things you're saying there, but me, I'm not. I don't mind. I don't mind being cracked.
Yep.
I don't hate it. Right.
Yeah.
If I was a troublemaker and I got up to no good, sure, I'd probably have to delete everything. But I'm not. I'm decent, like, member of society. I hope. And if something ever went down, I'd actually like to have all that tracking capability. So they go, oh yeah, where were you here? Yep, you're right. You were safe. Or, oh yeah, you had a handshake with this person, so you may be affected. I kind of like that part, if it works. But I never download, pretty well with anything, any program. I never download version 1. I normally wait until the bugs have been sorted out. Get a version 2.2 or 2.3 maybe, then I'm good to go. So let's give it a bit of time.
Look, I don't particularly have anything to hide in terms of what I'm doing and where I'm going. It's more the collective data that you could potentially get out of this. So you've got a phone number, you've got a date of birth, you've got a postcode, you've got where individuals are going regularly, which means that you can work out where their home is, you can work out where they work. Now you're saying you compile a whole bunch of different pieces of information. It wouldn't be hard to use that to basically steal an identity, in my opinion.
I think you can get a lot of that off most social media platforms anyway, if you're a social, even a light social media user.
True, you could. Yeah, absolutely you could. Yeah, look, I don't dispute that. I think there's a lot more scrutiny of social media platforms and the security and everything behind those than there is behind this app. I don't think there's Facebook's a global entity, Instagram's a global entity. They're massive companies, and they get a lot of attention. There's international laws in place relating to those sorts of companies and those those apps. I'm not sure about it's the same for this one. And you're right, it just comes down to what's better, giving up a little bit of your privacy for the benefit of society, or the opposite.
Cool.
Each their own. So
yeah, absolutely. How's your work going? How's your local industry going?
Yeah, look, I'm pretty lucky, mate. Actually, I sort of consider myself one of the lucky ones. I'm still in work. So, yeah, look, as you know, I do a lot of consulting work across the aviation industry.
And give it a plug, mate. This is your opportunity to plug it.
Yeah, give it a plug. Yeah, all the businesses Alacon Aero, and it's a business I started, aviation consulting, all manner of consultancy, but my primary focus is risk and safety management and operations support. I also do a lot of work in the remote piloted space as well. And that really combines the first two. So, and by that, what I mean is that, you have, when you talk about drones, I don't like the word drone, but most people know it as a drone. When you talk about drones, there's a lot of people out there, a lot of techies, a lot of tech heads that have some pretty fantastic ideas about how you could use a drone. But they have no idea about aviation. And so marketing the idea, developing that, getting it through regulatory approval, et cetera, is problematic for them. And they can't sell the product, even though it might be fantastic. And really the only way to, in terms of remotely piloted aircraft, you've got to approach it from a risk and safety perspective, because regulation is lagging. So that's sort of the combination. That's where I work predominantly. A lot of my work is, I've got contracts with government, and that's not just defence. That's across the board. I've got some contracts with larger larger aviation entities as well. So I've seen a bit of a decline in work, but I'm still fortunate that I have a bit going on. And yes, I consider myself lucky from that perspective.
Nice.
Yeah. So it's interesting, and like everyone else, like we were talking about before, I've had to adapt and be resilient, and look at all right. Well, in consulting, you're sort of always chasing the work, if that makes sense. You've got to look and sort of explore where you think things are going, and how you can support that. And we just talked about the new normal and stabilisation. Well, it's been chaos the last few months. The other thing that doesn't help is it's very difficult to try and negotiate contracts and work with people via this means. It's not something we're used to. People are getting used to it, but to start with, trying to hold business meetings and talk about how you can best support and assist, advise, consult. When you're talking to someone like this, it's not the same. You don't get a feel for body language and all those sorts of things. And again, with all the uncertainty that there is, people, there's reluctance. You can have the best product and people will still be a little bit reluctant to jump on board. So
sure, yeah.
But yeah, mate, I'm pretty lucky in that regard that I've still got enough to keep me ticking over.
Cool. I think industries that are becoming really big, and I know you're really good at this because we've discussed this before. You're actually quite good at this resilience piece, like understanding how to build resilience in a team or in an organisation. We've had that chat, and you're quite good at it, which is hopefully you can sort of do some work in that sort of space as well. One thing I'm noticing when I'm talking to people that I'm training, right, is it depends on the age of your workforce. So if they're 20-somethings, right, they don't know how to deal with it. They haven't got the resilient skills, right? So particularly, I had my boss come to me the other day and says, "Easty, I've got all of these people ringing me saying I can't handle this, can't handle this. They're sitting at home, they're working from home, and they're literally mulling over things in their mind. They're unable to deal with them. So they ring their supervisor or whatever to get advice." Okay, I think that resilience training needs to be pushed out there for people, especially like I said, especially the 20-somethings, but all the whole workforce. But that's, I think I see a bit of a future in that, especially at the moment.
Absolutely, I think definitely resilience. But the other aspect to that is how do the businesses adapt? So there's the individuals. How do they adapt to working from home? But I think I talk to a lot of people, and the comments quite often are, "I don't know how I'm going to go back to work when this thing's all over." It's not used to working from home, right? So initially it was this our generation, of course. It was this idea of, "Oh my God, I'm going to be stuck at home 24/7. This is terrible. I can't possibly cope." And now they're kind of like, "Oh, this actually kind of does work, and it's not actually that bad. I don't have that 30-minute commute every day, and I can sit at home in my pajamas, and my boss can only see my
the top half,
part of me. I can pretend like I'm drinking coffee when I'm actually having a sip of rum or something. And safety critical environments are out the window now, and blah, blah, blah. There's a whole bunch of bonuses. I can take regular breaks, and like people are starting to go, "Oh, maybe this isn't so bad." But the flip side of that is, how do businesses need to adapt to that as well, right? They've got to become resilient to the fact that people now have confirmed or proven that they can work from home and the business can continue. And one of the real issues that's starting to lead to is bosses, and I've deliberately used the word boss there, bosses feel like they're starting to lose control. They don't know that this idea that they can't be monitoring what their workforce is doing, that they don't have that ability to just reach in and say, right, I need you to do this now, and all of those sorts of things, and that they're not getting that that office sort of interaction and a whole bunch of things. So they feel like they don't have hands-on. They can't control people anymore. And that's proving a real challenge too. So there's resilience in both aspects there. Companies need to be resilient in terms of accepting this new normal, if you like, and that employees want to work in a different way and can work in a different way. It's a challenge, and certainly I think back to your point, that is an area which I think really there is potential there. There's certainly teaching people that resilience and how to cope with those changes. Look, if you can do it, change management is really what it is. That's and I think as I said earlier in the chat, people are not particularly good at change. It takes a lot to.
You change when you really have to. You just adapt to it. But
absolutely. Yeah, that's right. Change does not come easy. Yeah.
So obviously, with everything, communication is massive, right? You got to have that communication. So you're talking about a boss losing control of his people. That all comes down to that. One of the tenets of that is communicating with his people, not micromanaging, but just
look,
what's going on out there. I'm not seeing a lot of it from my workforce. I'm seeing some people are putting out emails. It's like a page-long email. Okay, I'll read most of that, but the local workforce, it's crickets at the moment, and that's a bit of a concern because they go to their meetings.
Yep,
they should be pushing all that information down, but they're not. And I think
right. Well, again, this is the difference between leadership and management, isn't it? And I mean that's a whole discussion in itself. But I think there's certain industries that are realising just how much of their day-to-day business activity was fluff. They've had to cut a lot of it away, and they're looking at it going, well, the employees are going, yep, we knew it was fluff. You've just proven it was fluff, but the managers are going, oh shit, how do we get our employees to be doing what we want them to do if we can't have meeting after meeting, and if we can't be directing them and forcing them and all of these sorts of things, and it's really interesting. Like you say, communication is key. But even more important, I think, is leadership, and it's trust. Look at what is it what is your output. I was always a firm believer of, there is always at least two ways to do something, and I don't necessarily care which way you do it, as long as you deliver that outcome. Right. And when I say I don't necessarily care, I do care from the perspective of, if there's an unsafe and a safe way, well, then obviously I'm going to tell you to do it the safe way. But, this idea that I don't have total control over you is foreign to a lot of people, right? Do you need that control if the employer is still delivering whatever the outcome is you're looking for? Yeah. Who cares if they're sitting at home in their pajamas? Who cares if they're only working 10 minutes in a day? Who cares if they're, taking a phone call, holding the phone in one hand while cradling their bloody baby in the other? If they're still giving you the output that you require of them. Yep,
absolutely. I'm gonna play around here a bit. I'm going to share my screen for a sec.
Oh yeah.
Just stand by, because I've got something really interesting for you. I was talking to a guy today about his workplace. So this slide is just one we use in our training for our culture, right? I'm sure you've seen it. Okay, 5 levels of safety culture. I've got a guy who literally said we are always proactive. Like we were calculative. We were, but now we're in a situation where we are. We've got a good hazard register, like a hazard tracking system in place. We manage our hazards. We've got good risk management in place, and our staff really believe that safety is genuinely worthwhile, 100%. Right. A year ago, they were calculative. They didn't necessarily believe with the training that they've had. They're right up there. He said, we're bouncing between proactive and generative. He said, now we are flat out reactive, 100%. We can't, with this at the moment, with this lack of communication, no one really knows what's going on anymore. We're waiting for that accident to happen before we know what to do next. And that is actually kind of scary. Right? That's something I've been talking a lot about in the last couple of days with a couple of people.
Look, it's interesting. I guess my points on this particular slide, there's a couple of things I don't like about the slide necessarily. Firstly, I don't think it has been around a long time, or versions of it. Yeah, you're right. Generative safety culture, is this? I guess it's a concept. It's not necessarily something you can actually achieve. It's like infinity, I guess, or tomorrow. You never actually get to tomorrow. Tomorrow continues to move. So that's where a generative safety culture is. So the definition that flows below that, safety is how we do business around here, really doesn't tell you much. A generative safety culture is something we strive for. And really what you're talking about there is not safety is how we do business, but safety comes into everything that we do, right? That's really what you're talking about with the generative safety culture. I would argue that there are a lot of workplaces who would say they are somewhere around about the proactive stage. In reality, I tend to think that most workplaces that I've seen, been involved with, are probably just reaching reactive. Pathological, again, I don't like that term at the bottom of the spectrum here. Who cares? Who cares as long as we're not caught? Look, to me, pathological is actually more about a lack of understanding. It's not that we don't care, it's that we don't know. And it's not about not being caught, it's about again, not understanding. So if you don't understand, well, you can't react or you can't get to that next step. So I work with and find that a lot of people sit in this sort of somewhere between pathological and reactive purely because there's a lack of understanding, or there's a lack of information, which goes to your point of communication, right?
Is that civilian or defence or both?
Well, look, obviously I worked in defence for a long time, mate. I would say that defence is in the same situation. I think, if you look at defence in particular, post, mid-90s through to mid-2000s, I think we were somewhere between calculative and proactive. And I think in recent years, from what I've seen, it's started to slide. And there's a bunch of reasons why I think that's happened. Again, that would be another podcast probably on its own. But yeah, I tend to think that most people are somewhere around the reactive. Safety is important, sure. We do a lot every time we have an accident. I think accident's a strong term. I think, safety is important, and there's a lot done when someone identifies something or when someone actually sits down and thinks about it. So there's, that's the reactive piece. When you talk about calculative, we have systems in place to manage hazards. Okay, that's great. If you've got systems in place to manage hazards, good, but you actually need to manage, not just have the system. You need to be able to understand, identify, implement, and ensure that it's fixed. So just having a system in place is useless if no one understands the system, if people don't actually use the system, if, the procedures are not necessarily clear or any of those sorts of things. So That's why I say that I don't think we're necessarily in a calculative, or a lot of people are in a calculative environment. Yeah, they, by virtue of the fact they have to, they'll have a system in place, but it's not well understood. It's not necessarily used. It doesn't serve its purpose. Yeah.
Interesting. It's a very interesting take on it. I haven't. That's why I talked to you, Simon, because you've got a different view on the world, and it's definitely you put a good understanding and good reasoning behind it. I like that part. Yeah.
And look, the line. I think the most important line on this whole, or piece of this whole slide, is the far or the top left, which says informed.
Sure.
And just as I was talking about there, it all comes down to communication. Really, to me, is the same as informed. You can't be informed without communication. So those two go hand in hand. And again, mindfulness is a byproduct of how informed you are. The more informed you are, the more mindful you are. That said, obviously you can be informed and just zone out. That's possible, but I think information, or being informed, really is key in all of this. As I said, to go from pathological to reactive, you've got to have a level of background understanding. You have to be informed to go from reactive to calculative. Obviously, you've got to be informed that there is a system, but you've also got to be informed about how to use that system, what the purpose of it is, et cetera, et cetera. And then as you go up those rungs, it's all about the level of information. I think it's an interesting slide.
It brings it into some sort of perspective, right? So we were just talking before about how leaders, you think the leaders are losing grip of what they're doing, and where they're trying to reach for these higher levels of safety culture and safety mindedness, and this whole situation is really dragging them back due to those things. Yeah, they're not informed as much because the communication is dropping off. Is the reporting culture still happening? Like at our particular work, we've probably got about 20% of the workforce going in doing their thing on a staggered shift sort of roster. Is the reporting still happening? Like some sections definitely are, but from the other ones, there's nothing. So it'll be very interesting to see how that's going.
And again, reporting is a really interesting one, and this goes into sort of such as I was talking about. We have systems in place. So people like to say we're really safe because we've got a system of reporting hazards. Okay, that's great, right? You report the hazard. What happens with that? Right? Two things need to happen with it. Firstly, everyone needs to read it and understand it, and then secondly, you have to have an output from that. Just reporting it does nothing. If people don't, if they're again informed, if there's a report there but people haven't read it, then they're not informed, right? Having a system is by itself, is kind of pointless,
if it's not used effectively.
Yeah, and the other thing that's right. And for you now, that system, the system that in the defence context, the system which has been in place for, I was involved in sort of aviation risk management when it first reared its head back in the early 2000s, where a lot of these systems came into being. I'm guessing it hasn't evolved in the last 3 months as a result of COVID. So those systems now don't really work in, like you're talking about, they don't work in the environment that you now find yourselves.
Really? Why not? It's still the same process, right? You've got to go through and assess the risk, even though the consequences may be different now, but it's still. What does it change?
Well, if we look at reporting and culture and everything we do, if people, in my opinion, don't have a fundamental and good understanding of risk management, so when they try and apply that to a different environment, it's not necessarily applied appropriately, and that's because the system, in my opinion, doesn't enable them to, to actually apply it to their particular environment. That's the first aspect. The second aspect is reporting. We talked about reporting. Again, if no one's reading the reports, they're kind of pointless. One of the best things I think about it, just to push out an email to someone and say, "Hey, read this safety report." How many people do?
Yeah, not many.
Now, if you're in an office environment or a crew room environment, and you go, "Hey guys, have you just read this safety report? What do you reckon of this? Let's have a chat about it." Well, then you know that they're going to have actually some input to it. They're going to read it. They're going to know about it. They're going to have an understanding. So you can't really do that in the current environment that you're in. I'm not saying that you necessarily were doing that even before
we've had that discussion as well.
Yeah, we have. So I just think the system, you're right, the basic principles of how you identify and treat risk haven't changed. But when you now have this bit of an expectation that people are going to apply that in a different environment without the core fundamental understanding of risk and safety management, it doesn't work because the system doesn't support it to work. The system is designed around a very specific environment, and that is, a squadron environment or a deployed squadron environment. That's really what it was designed around, not this dislocated, working arrangement that's now in place. I think I think there would have been a slide in where people sit on that rung from the slide you just brought up before.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, I like that. Thanks for that. That does help a lot actually in my workplace. I need to get out there and do a few things. You're almost like my boss telling me what you've just given me a task, basically, which is great.
Right, there you go. Oh, sorry.
No, that's awesome. That's exactly what I need. It's really interesting.
Yeah, look, there's. I also think that the defence system, is a little bit backward, and it's not just the defence system. When we look at particularly risk management, I once had a very interesting discussion with someone about what comes first. We talk about the chicken or the egg, and in this case, it's what comes first: your standing instructions or your risk management plans. And my opinion is your risk management plan comes first, because that's where you generate your controls in your risk management plan are the genesis of your standing instructions, right?
Which then should become the full-on documentation at some stage, the AAP. Yep.
Absolutely, 100%. And, that's the military context. It's exactly the same in the civilian context. We just call them different things. OIP or operations manuals or whatever you want to call it, whatever terminology you use. It's I think that's a really interesting perspective. If you were to apply the risk management process in the correct logical order, your SIs would be about a tenth the size of what they are. And most companies, OIP operations manuals and the like would be the same. But people don't understand, not only do they not understand the system, but they don't understand, inherently people will remember things if they understand why that rule or regulation exists.
Yep.
And you can apply this in any context, right? And I apply it to some extent now. You say, let's say there's an instruction that says you must operate with this particular system, right? That's what the instruction says. To go flying, you have to have this system operational. And people go, all right, I'm going to have the system operational. But no one understands why.
Yeah.
And then at some point,
is there another system we can use, or Yep.
Absolutely, and then at some point in time, inherently, what happens is someone can't go flying because they don't have that system, and then they go, well, this is really restrictive, so let's change the instruction. And it's like, well, do you understand why that instruction existed in the first place and what it's protecting you against? you may rethink whether or not you remove that instruction or change that instruction. And then you look at now the environment we live in. The government says you can't go out, you can't go to the beach, right? And everyone goes, well, that's ridiculous. Why can't I go to the beach? And with a simple explanation of why you shouldn't go to the beach, I think everyone would probably go, oh, okay, fair enough. Well, that's pretty reasonable, right? And so just throwing these rules or systems in place is pointless unless again I go back to the informed piece. Inform people of why you're doing things, and everyone will come along for the ride, guaranteed. So
yeah. There you go. I like a good example of that. So I can't remember if she's federal or state, but one of the health ministers on TV said that the planes weren't allowed to do their flyovers on Anzac Day, the warbird.
Oh, yeah.
Because that will force people to gather. Well, no, it won't. We've got rules to not gather. So she said, no, they're banned. They're not allowed to fly. These boys took off anyway. Now I love that. That's great.
Oh, I thought it was brilliant too. When I saw the news article, I was like, yes, excellent.
So you've got a workforce there. So these pilots, they're not dumb people. They're quite intelligent people.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other thing with aircrew is that you put in place a rule, and they will try and find a way around that rule. 100%. And even more so if they think it's a stupid rule, right? So by adding in the why, and if it's a reasonable why, I think people are generally will go, fair enough. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. All right.
And they bet it, didn't they? They didn't go telling everybody that they were going to take off, so thousands of people didn't go down the beach. They just told no one. No one gathers. Bam.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you see all these videos on Facebook. It's like of people taking the piss out of press conferences, right? And they're like, so today we're imposing restrictions whereby you can do this, except when you can't do that unless this is the case, except if that's the case. And it's like, yeah, exactly, right? Like it makes no sense. It's just
There's always going to be that pushback, right? And that's good. So it's kind of
yeah, absolutely. And again that pushback, I think, in some extent relates to it's generational. So you talked before about young people who lack of resilience, and a big part of that is, I think, is that the current younger generations are used to having everything at their fingertips right now, and all of a sudden you say, nope. Yep. And they really, really struggle with that. Whereas, people like, the military people are just going, all right, hang on a second, you want me just to stay at home? So just like when I was on deployment, like, okay, right, fair enough. It's like I've been in far worse situations than this. I'm at home, I'm with my family. Like you were saying before, I'm at home with my family. I've been in lockdown for 3 months in the Middle East, where I've got no access to family or anything.
This is fine. Yeah.
Yeah, this is fine. There's nothing wrong with this. But
I don't have to breathe in sand all day long. And
absolutely. I mean, it's compared to that. But I've got two teenagers, and one of them in particular really, really struggles. Why this is stupid, and why can't I see my friends? Why can't I go out? I won't get coronavirus. I could already have it, and so locking me up now is not going to do anything, because if I've already got it, then I mean the list goes on, right?
So how does it go when you tell them no?
Yeah, and you can tell them no, but again, that doesn't necessarily help. But I think older generations who have lived through depressions and wars and other sort of things are far more resilient, because they know it can get a whole lot worse. This is nothing new to them, but for the younger generations, they're not used to it. They haven't seen anything like this. They've grown up in an environment where they can do what they want when they want, with access to everything.
I thought we were running out of things to talk about half an hour ago, but we're still going.
Yeah. I just realised what time was, mate.
No, it's great. It's awesome. No, that brought up to a really good point. So, and I've only just thought of this. Anzac Day was just the other day, and by no means is COVID-19 the same situation as a war. Okay, I'm not even going to put it in the same ballpark. But during war, whether it be World War I, World War II, Vietnam, or whatever other battle anyone's been involved in, you had a young workforce that had to deploy and go do things that were out of their comfort zone, and they had to adapt, they had to adapt, and they had to display resilience and raw courage and all that sort of stuff. Okay? Yes, now we've got a workforce that just has to sit at home and be on the couch, and that is their form of resilience. But how do they do that? How did the fellas that were going off to World War II deal with it? How did they build it up? Why did they do it for? They knew what they were doing. They knew that they were doing it for king and country, or queen and country, depending on which war you're talking about. And they stood up, they stuck their chest out, and they did it. How do we adapt that to what's going on today?
Whoa, that's a pretty.
You don't have to answer that. It's just out there. Just have a think about it.
Well, I think in part, a lot of those younger guys who went off to World War I, II, it was a bit of a rebellious streak. It was like, I can leave my family early. I don't have to go to school. I can shoot off to war. I'll travel the world, see some sights, and I won't be being dictated to by my parents. So there's that aspect. I think there was also, a bit more shame in not going. So, you didn't want to be the only guy on your street who wasn't shipped off to war, or who wasn't doing his part for king and country. And I think, back then there was a lot more community mindedness and community spirit than what we have now. We're much more a me generation, dare I say it. But how do you bring it back? I think you've got to put it in the context of what's in it for them, right? You're trying to force them to do something and be resilient. Well, what's in it for them? Back in the day, people didn't need a "what's in it for me." It was, this is for good of the country. That same response doesn't quite fly with today's generation. You're doing this for the good of country. They want to know, well, what's in it for me? I'm actually quite surprised. From what I've seen, the younger generation, they're all about digital technology, right? They're all about communications through online tools and apps and things. And here is the perfect opportunity. You don't have to go to school. Everything is done online. You are savvy in all of that technology that is now being used in day-to-day life for everything. You should be in your prime, I would have thought, but for whatever reason, it's strange, And the funny one I saw was a picture going around, and it was so it's something along the lines of, isn't it interesting that that all the people in America who have spent years and years prepping for such a circumstance, and now the people who are claiming that their civil liberties are being impeached by being asked to stay at home, and it's that's kind of the same here, really, for me. It's like, you constantly are asking, your generation is asking, I don't want to have to go to work, I don't have to go to school, I just want to be able to spend all my day online talking to my friends. Here you've got the perfect opportunity, and you're saying, this is bullshit, I don't want to have to stay at home. Like, I don't get it. I don't get it.
Wouldn't it be nice if we could just put them all on a ship to Egypt with 1,000 horses on board, and just deal with that and see how you go?
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah.
Things have changed. Things talk about the cruise ship industry.
Yeah. Yeah. But I don't know how you build the same level of resilience. it's a challenge.
Yeah. No, it's a different culture, 100%. It's different.
Well, it's cultural,
different
and as I said before, changing a cultural attitude is a very difficult thing to do, and certainly it takes a lot of time. Yeah.
Cool.
All
All
right,
right, mate. No, that's pretty well all I've got for tonight.
Sure.
Unless you've got anything else really important you want to have a chat about, mate.
No, mate. I think we've had a good chat. I think we've talked about
coming up on 2 hours. There's a lot of podcasts out there that if they think they break the half hour, that it's taboo. Oh, you can't make it longer than half an hour. I personally like the long form. If you want,
I guess
listen to it over a few car trips. If you don't. Yeah, it's fine. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, I mean, you can always take the long ones and split it into a multitude of short ones, right?
Yeah.
Top and tail it, and have an intro and an outro, and good to go. Whatever works.
We can make CrewFusion clips, just short 4-minute segments, maybe, of you talking about risk management or kids' resilience or something like that. Yeah, absolutely, mate.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, look, whatever works.
Cool. Yeah. All right. Well, thanks again, Simon. Totally appreciate your time and your effort that you put into it. And
thanks for the invite, mate. It's good to chat. Particularly in these times, it's nice to be able to chat aviation and
well, let's let a few things happen in the airline industry. Watch how it mulls over, and we'll get back together sometime. And
absolutely, mate. Anytime.
What we think is going to happen next. All right.
Yeah.
But thanks, buddy. You have yourself a good night, and we'll see you soon.
You too, mate. Cheers.
Be strong, be bold. Bye-bye.
That's it. See you, mate.